Good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Davis, and you're listening to NPR News. When federal agents surged into Minnesota in January, communities didn't just face a legal issue, they faced a moral one. And faith leaders showed up. Churches, synagogues, and mosques became distribution hubs for food and diapers. Nonprofits organized ride shares and distributed rent money. Clergy mobilized to protest, sing, champion, and in some cases, face arrest. The line we heard again and again was, "Our faith compels us." What the federal government called Operation Metro Surge is over now, but churches, mosques, synagogues, and faith-based nonprofits say the work is just beginning. I'm joined today by a panel of clergy who've been on the front lines of this movement, and we have an audience of even more faith leaders here with us at NPR News headquarters in downtown St. Paul. We are grateful they're here to bear witness. Let me introduce our panel. Janae Bates Amari is a minister and the co-executive director of Isaiah. That is a Minnesota-based, multiracial, nonpartisan coalition of faith communities. Isaiah was one of the groups that organized and called for the Day of Truth and Freedom on January 23rd. We're so glad you're here, Janae.
Thank you. Really glad to be here.
Pastor Yarold Osorto is the senior pastor of St. Paul's San Pablo Lutheran Church in the Phillips neighborhood of Minneapolis. That puts his church within a few miles of where both Renee Good and Alex Preddy were killed. The congregation of San Pablo is also primarily Hispanic, so there is a lot to talk about. Thanks for joining us, Pastor.
Thank you for having me.
Next is Rabbi Ariel Lakach Rosenberg, the lead rabbi at Shir Tikva Synagogue, a Reform congregation in South Minneapolis. She's also a part of March, Minnesota, which is another multiracial, multi-faith organization that mobilized to respond to the immigration surge. And we'll be talking about that, Rabbi. Glad you're here.
So glad to be in the conversation.
Also with us is Imam Molid Ali, who serves as an imam and a youth counselor at Abubakar As-Sadiq Islamic Center in Minneapolis. Welcome, Imam Molid.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So let's start with a look back and talk about what each of you and your communities experienced when federal immigration agents came flooding into Minnesota. Pastor Yarold, I want to begin with you because on your church's website, it says your congregation is, quote, multicultural, rooted in a neighborhood that has always received new immigrants, multilingual, worshiping in Spanish and English where once we sang in Swedish, inclusive, making a place at the table for anyone who hungers. I love that description. Tell us more about your own history and the history of your church and how that prepared you for this moment.
That's a good question. So I like to always say that we as a congregation have always been an immigrant community, and we've been around for 139 years, rooted in the Midtown Phillips neighborhood. And I think that grounding of our identity as a place that ensures that anyone that walks through our doors has a sense of belonging has consistently been the through line. And so that prepared us in ways that, looking back, we may not have known we were being prepared for, but it really gave us a sense of clarity of what our role was during a time of great upheaval and despair, and ensuring that this building that we have been a part of for so long would remain open for our community was part of the work that was able to sustain what came during the surge.
And because of much of the rhetoric that was already out there, did you all foresee that there would be a need to provide like a long-term sanctuary?
Yes. I mean, that was a question that we were contending with a year and a half ago when the question of whether or not a church could serve as a sanctuary was placed at the forefront. And many were questioning, could we be a sanctuary? And our community said, of course, because that's who we are. Whether or not the federal government is willing to respect sanctuary, we were going to remain sanctuary.
So tell me about some of the practical things that you did to make sure that your church really was a literal and spiritual sanctuary.
Yeah. Back in March of 2025, we started finding ways to support our congregants with legal aid and ensuring that everyone that could access a lawyer would have a lawyer for their particular cases. We then launched well-being sessions where we offer acupuncture and Reiki once a month in our sanctuary. Again, playing with that idea of the space that we gather in is truly a place of healing. And so our members throughout a year have practiced ways to care for their physical well-being just as much as their spiritual well-being. And the last is our dancing. We love to dance as a community, and we've been really insistent on that defiant joy. And so we launched quarterly dance parties and insisted on having them in our sanctuary. So that space that often is only seen as a contained space on Sunday really became this expansive place of sanctuary for the community throughout the week.
And I have in my notes that you paid to have a shower and a washer and dryer installed in the building. Did you end up using all of that?
We did once, but not because it was directly connected to the surge. For another situation for our unhoused neighbors is when we ended up using the shower.
I understand that you are a child of undocumented immigrants. So this has been very personal, right? So tell me a little bit about your thinking as you were watching things happen and change here.
I'm feeling the weightiness of that question, partially because it took me back to what it was to be a child growing up with parents that were constantly living in fear and needing to be the strong one. And during this time, seeing so many children having to face that same reality and wanting to do everything in my power to ensure that those kids don't grow up the same way that I did, carrying that guilt of not being able to have done enough to protect my parents. And so throughout this time, I think that insistence on being community together is something that I didn't have growing up. And so to be able to witness the power of that and to play a small role in ensuring that my community could be together during such a difficult time really has helped sustain this really difficult time. I mean, and there's still a lot of grief and lament that we're all not processing completely, but that's what stands out.
And unlike many places of worship, I understand that San Pablo, you did not see a drop in your Sunday attendance during the surge. People were afraid to leave their home, but they came to services.
It truly is an act of resistance when a community who is under such a threat where their human dignity is on the line to insist on showing up and worshiping. I mean, it's a true testament of living out your faith. And for us, throughout these last several months, and I would say years, that commitment to being together and worshiping together has remained. The through line throughout these several months has been, I am brave because we are brave. And we've said that time after time, every Sunday in some way or another. And that really has held us as we have gathered together.
Rabbi Ariel, I'll turn to you next because I know your synagogue partnered with Pastor Yerel's church to respond to the surge of immigration enforcement. Tell us how that came about and why that was important for you to help out.
Yes, so Shir Tikva Synagogue, which is in South Minneapolis, has been a sanctuary synagogue since the Trump's first administration. And when they took away the protected status for sensitive locations, for houses of worship, for hospitals, and for schools, we really had to think about how we were going to approach this question of sanctuary, how we were going to make sure that we, both our physical space and also ourselves as neighbors, offered that sense of refuge and of security to each other in a very uncertain time. And so I was lucky to already be friends with Pastor Yerel. We were already inside of learning and exploring what it felt like to be and what it meant to be clergy in the Twin Cities in this time. And when the surge began, we then had the opportunity to say, how do we continue to build stability and a sense of dignity, right? Courage and beauty in our communities. And so what I witnessed was that the members of my community were out on the streets, were commuting, were paying attention to their neighbors and making sure that we were doing everything we could to keep each other safe. I also saw that there were members of my community that were sheltering in place or that were navigating the streets wearing their documents in clear lanyards to try to guard against being stopped by federal agents. So we were noticing many different kinds of impact, and we were accountable to our neighbors, which meant that we were able to show up for and with San Pablo to say, like, okay, what are we going to build together? And that looked like creating ritual space that was joyful and song-filled and multivocal and multilingual. And it also looked like creating mutual aid fund, which we called the Yesod Fund, which means foundation, which enabled for a sort of an audacious foundation below not just our communities, but also in the Twin Cities and now supporting people in over 25 cities around the state of Minnesota. And so what has been amazing for me is that like these little seeds, right, the seed of friendship or the seed of community and commitment have been able to, even in the context of so much repression, make like a flowering of creativity and of new possibilities that I don't think 6 months ago I would have been able to imagine.
And that's a powerful thing when you're going through something hard, to know that you're not going through it alone. So that partnership is that's important.
Absolutely. I think it can be so easy, I think, if you experience something unimaginable by yourself, to become overwhelmed or to experience despair. And I think that being connected to other people to say, like, are you seeing this? Like, what are you doing? What do you imagine? What do you need? It helps plant our feet back on the ground. And I think that for me, the way that as a community leader and as a neighbor and as a parent, the way that I navigated this time was just by finding the next right thing to do. I couldn't see far ahead. I couldn't imagine March when we were in January, right? But I could find the next right thing to do. And that was because of the relationships, because of the people around me.
Your family is from Eastern Europe, and so do you think your own history sort of informed your response?
Oh, absolutely. So my great-grandparents immigrated to the United States. They came here because of the violence they were experiencing in their communities in Lithuania and in Czechoslovakia. And so I grew up with stories of this feeling of being so isolated and having no other choice but to leave. Right, and that's not a unique story, right? So many people are here in this country because of stories like that. But I think I grew up with a real a yearning to be in a kind of community that would show up for one another and would throw down, right, and not let each other get isolated. And I've been so proud of the state of Minnesota and so inspired by the ways that our neighbors have held together.
And Rabbi, I mean, you lead a congregation, and not an activist organization, but did this moment change how you lead and change like some of the places and situations you found yourself in?
Oh, I love that. I mean, so at first, like Shir Tikva would be very fast to say, but wait, like we are both a community of activists and like we are an upstart and activist synagogue. We see our work as a faith community so much about being around transformation and working for tikkun olam, working for the healing and sort of the mending of the broken pieces of our world. And so I think that it is actually possible to hold together a real sense of audacious activism and faithful practice. But what I would say is that what's changed for me is the clarity that truth-telling is actually at the heart of my faithful service, right? That I am a pastoral presence. I am so lucky to get to be inside of life cycle, from birth all the way till the end of life with my community. I get to walk with my people, and it's the honor of my life. And I have a real responsibility as a leader of my community to tell the truth, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when it feels exposing. And I think that these months, when so much of the strategy of the federal administration has been to try to distract us or overwhelm us or tell us what we see is not what we're seeing, the role of faith leaders to tell the truth, even when it feels risky, and especially then, has been very galvanizing for me.
It was, for me, it was something to see, faith leaders at protest and dealing with tear gas. Mm-hmm. Were you and members of your congregation in some of those scenarios, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I would say that yes, like we found each other on the streets again and again. And it was interesting, actually, as a rabbi, to realize that part of my responsibility was to show up on the streets, both as a hopeful de-escalating presence, because it was very clear to me that the federal agents were not showing up to de-escalate. They were there, and no matter what was happening, they were ratcheting up the pressure and the aggression against neighbors who were there as witnesses and as support. And so as clergy people, we have a responsibility to show up and to try to help keep the calm, keep that sense of of dignified solidity for our community. But also I realized that as our community was being transformed by the violence and the aggression that we were witnessing on a day-to-day basis, it was my job to show up to also be transformed, right? That if my community's nervous system was vibrating at a particular pitch, my nervous system had to be there, not to be escalating, but actually to be there and then help us settle down. And so I was on 34th in Portland in the minutes and hours after Renee Good was murdered. I was in front of Glamdal Donuts on Nicollet after Alex Preddy was murdered, specifically, right, witnessing the sort of violence and repression that ICE and Border Patrol were perpetrating on our streets, and also to really witness the brave and dignified presence of our neighbors.
Let's turn to Imam Maulid Ali. Imam, you are a Somali American, so even aside from your leadership in the mosque, you were uniquely affected by all of this, as was your Somali community. And so when you look back at the past few months, is there a moment that you recall when you truly became alarmed, when you maybe even became, afraid of what you were seeing happen?
Yeah. So I'm an imam in South Minneapolis, and honestly, when I saw the killing of Renee Good, and then on the 24th of January, the killing of Alex Preddy, I said to myself, this is a very difficult issue, and safety is number one, and that anybody could be killed. And that was the time, actually, that I thought that this is getting out of hand. And we as a community, we became part of the effort that was going on at that time. We went to the place where Renee Good was killed, and I delivered a speech demanding justice for Renee Good and her family, and also for Alex Preddy. When we saw that violence, we thought that this is not the neighborhood they were familiar with in Minneapolis. This was not normal, and that it cannot continue in this way. So my faith teaches me that in a moment like that, I speak to my congregation to keep the hope, but also to pray, but at the same time to engage with everyone else, with our neighbors, faith leaders, to make sure that faith doesn't just become a private matter, it becomes a collective effort, because that's the moral duty that we have, that we speak up. And I think that was the time that I said that I have to come out and be part of this, so that together we can end this violence, and that we can demand justice and truth for our communities.
We know that words matter, and when I think back to some of the words that President Trump has used, the rhetoric from the get-go, we've heard, regular use of this term or this word. In December, the president referring to Somalis as garbage. What was that like for your community to hear the President of the United States describe so many people in such a way?
Well, it was very unfortunate. That, the president would say some, a despicable word like that to our community. But, I think our community, we kind of we overcame that because of what we saw, that the president's derogatory remarks on the Somali Americans, we were hoping that it will stop there. But when we saw the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, we see that this is not only words, this is now killing American citizens. So actually, what happened after that made us forget about what the president said. Yeah.
How did you respond to what was happening during the operation? What were you able to do to help as a faith leader?
Speak up. Just show up, talk to the people, and just make sure that, we keep hope alive. We make sure that we tell people that hardship is not the final decree, it's not the final word. And there is a passage in the Quran that says, Inna ma'al usri yusra, that indeed with every hardship comes ease. So just keeping that hope especially in precarious moments. That was my role as a faith leader, because as a faith leader, I have two wings, just to say so. You have the wing of faith and of making sure that you connect people to God, and then the other wing of like supporting people, giving food, and making sure that the material support is there. So we're trying to keep the equilibrium or the balance between the two. But I think the faith is the interior support that everyone needs, especially in difficult moments. Because with hope, I think we can overcome every challenge. Because with hope, we can make better decisions. With hope, we can at least see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's the role of faith in every difficult moment.
Do you think that that you and many of your Somali neighbors, were you really prepared for what happened? Do you think you were ready to deal with it and face it?
Well, no, we were not prepared. I think it was a big surprise to us, like anybody else in Minnesota, and we didn't know this was coming. But we just have to, deal with the moment. We didn't choose the moment, and we didn't know that it was coming. But after it came to us, we had to respond the way we did. Yeah.
What about the young people, the teenagers, the children? And I'm imagining what they were seeing and hearing, and maybe what their family members were trying to protect them from. How would you describe how the younger folks dealt with this?
It's a good question. So in December, when President Trump called the Somali Americans, that derogatory word, we spoke to our youth and we made it clear that your dignity, that no one, no matter how powerful they may be, they cannot take that away from you. So we try to keep that confidence in them, that no matter any words that any person say, no matter how powerful they may seem, nobody can take that dignity away from it. It's a God-given dignity. So that's one of the things we did in our community, to spread confidence and not to succumb to this kind of rhetoric, to have a better approach and to respond, evil with good ideas. I mean, it's a horrible thing to disrespect an entire community, but we have better ideas. Unity, respecting our neighbors, using a better language, and I think that's what we did.
I want to hear your story, Janae. Isaiah, a faith organization that you help lead, uniquely positioned, to stand in the gap here. Tell us about what Isaiah did as that operation, as we saw it ramp up, and why do you think you were able to respond so quickly?
Yes. So I'm really grateful to get to be on this panel with these folks too, because I've gotten to work with most of them in doing this work, and a bunch of folks who are here. And the beauty of it is really these relationships. So what our organization does is it is deeply committed to real organizing, which means leadership development. And it is developing clergy, it's developing lay leaders to full-throatedly from their faith be able to shift the environment, transform things for the better, so that we truly do have the racial equity, the economic equity that we all deserve, but really so that we are all able to thrive. And, we get to, we talk sometimes about something called some like political meteorology, that we have to kind of learn how to read the tea leaves about what is happening in the world, and then how are we responding from our faith lens. And in the beginning of 2025, I think all of our tea leaves were buzzing, right? And so as we were kind of moving into the spring, knowing that the big bad bill was going to pass, and starting to understand what the implications of that federal bill were for Minnesota, what it would mean for healthcare, what it would mean for housing, what it would mean for food assistance, our organization decided to help to anchor something called Lighthouse. And Lighthouse is much bigger than Isaiah. It's faith communities across the state who decided to come together, and it's clergy. It's hundreds and hundreds of clergy across Minnesota. And through Lighthouse, we were able to start to build infrastructure about how do clergy respond when and if a rapid response moment happens.
So this is in the summer of 2025.
That was in the summer of 25.
You're bringing together leaders from mosques, synagogues, and churches together to strategize.
Yeah. Yes. And so in starting to work together, strategize together, we started to kind of build what are the sets of things that we need, the real tools we need. We all got on Signal back in the summer. We all started to create spaces in our own congregations, creating core teams, groups of people who were taking responsibility for doing this transformative work around us. And then we really, we started to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. And so we spent the summer and fall doing this work, and then it kind of crescendoed to a large event that we held in December. So on December 13th, we held a giant event where there were 5,000 of us who showed up at the Minneapolis Convention Center, and it was a full day training about what the heck are we going to do about this authoritarian regime. What are we doing that is grounded in our faith, grounded in us taking responsibility for what's happening around us, grounded in knowing that we just had a president call a large group of people garbage, grounded in knowing that we are hearing the ways in which our health care is going to be taken, if not already, the ways in which our food assistance programs are impacted. And we're also knowing the ways in which ICE is descending, not just across the country, but in our own state. And so we did this full training with our leaders. And frankly, we thought we're building the infrastructure for something that we're going to use in March. We're having a giant event on Palm Sunday. So we thought we're building it for that. We're building it for Eid. We're building it for the 250th anniversary of this country. We did not know that we were actually building it for January 7th.
Right. So you're already creating this network, not knowing what January would reveal. So I know at one point you said you were preparing for a moment that we didn't even know was coming. Yeah. Does that feel was that God working?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That was absolute divine intervention. I'd like to say it was us being really smart humans, but no. It really was, I believe wholeheartedly, it was a faith-filled and prophetic move. And we even called it, we said this was a launch. And it is a launch into really beautiful prophetic and full-throated faith witness that we got to exercise and got to see, and frankly got to see happen across Minnesota in a bunch of ways that we weren't even directly connected to. Mm-hmm. The ways in which Minnesotans showed up was a living, breathing sermon. And it is it's something I'm incredibly grateful for, even despite it being one of the hardest things we've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. And I will also say, it was a battle that we got to win together. And it's sad that we're using war language, but that is, it's the reality. We are not at peacetime. We are in a literal war right now. And it was a beautiful thing that Minnesota got to be the first test, mm-hmm. because we had so much infrastructure where we could respond and we could show the rest of the country what's possible, and that you don't have to acquiesce to the kind of violence and oppression and horror that they're bringing to us, and that we get to show a true contrast about what's possible.
There are many images that stick with me, video and photos. One of the videos I think about a lot, and I've been thinking a lot preparing for this conversation, was the day that there were faith leaders who came in, I think, from around the country, who were on their knees, I think, out at the airport.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to see like that situation unfold, and other situations where you had just, large groups of clergy standing together?
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna. The listeners are gonna get to hear a little bit of how the sausage gets made about those kinds of things. 100 clergy were arrested at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport that day. There were hundreds more that were ready to. We actually had to be like, wait, we need to orchestrate this so that folks are very clear about what's happening. And you're right, March brought in hundreds of clergy, and we're like, God bless you. We are so grateful you're here. And it should be Minnesotans mostly who are doing this protest together. And so there were hundreds of clergy from across the country who were like, we're down and we're ready to do this. And we're like, beautiful. And we're going to make sure that Minnesota clergy are at the front lines, because we've been at the front lines and we're the ones that are going to have to deal with the aftermath of what happens here. And so those clergy, and many of them are in this room today, their goal was not to go get arrested, to be clear. Civil disobedience is not about, I want to go and get arrested. It is, I am bearing public witness, and I am so clear and so determined and so convicted about what is happening in our state that we are literally having thousands of people abducted, and not just people, our neighbors abducted from our state, being flown out of this very airport every single day. At that time, we were up to 100 of our neighbors being flown out every day. And so they came and they said, we are going to bear witness to what's happening. We're going to be truth tellers about what's happening. We are going to pray and let the world see us praying about this. And when they will try to remove us, we're not going to move. And we do realize that that is risking arrest. And that's what they were willing to do. And I think that showing, that demonstration, that happened in a bunch of different places. Actually, on the Day of Truth and Freedom, there was a sit-in at U.S. Bank where they demanded to speak to the CEO. There were clergy, hundreds of clergy who showed up there. Clergy showed up at Target weeks before that, making demands and being willing to risk arrest. And there are, I think, more and more opportunities in which we're going to see things like this happen. But it is a beautiful thing that we have so many folks who are so committed to their faith and committed to one another, and the belief that what we do and say really matters, and that we have to be moral witnesses in this time. And frankly, I think it opened up the eyes of so many Minnesotans and so many people across this country who may have thought, like, is faith actually even relevant right now? And are seeing that, there's this thing that connects all of us and calls us to more.
Is faith relevant anymore? It saddens me to ask that question, but I know that is a question a lot of people are wrestling with. Pastor Yerold, when are people coming to you with questioning their faith, or asking like where is God in all of this? Is that a conversation you've been having?
Yes. I would be really, really terrified if no one would be asking those questions, because one should question, where is God in all of this? When we see the kind of diabolical forces that unleash so much evil among our people, we should question. And I think that questioning in my community has really helped clarify how God shows up. And in a community that has been in the thick of this terror, they have a clear sense that God shows up in neighbor. God shows up when they show up and help one another. God shows up when they ensure that the person that needs to go across the street to grab something from their home can do that safely. And that then reframes this notion that God isn't here. God is always with us. And one thing that I love in our congregation, we put up this sign the Sunday after Renee Good's murder that says, "Aquí estamos y no nos vamos." We're here and we're not leaving. And in our community, I had someone say, I wasn't sure if God was still here, but that sign reminds me that God is here and God isn't leaving. And so that's what I'm seeing come up in this moment in my community of faith.
Rabbi Ariel, are you having conversations with people who are questioning their faith or questioning their belief in a higher power that is supposed to be, protecting all of us and making sure that good prevails over evil?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a birthright in Jewish community to ask a lot of questions, and doubt and questioning is absolutely at the center, right? The center of how it is that we wrestle with our text and we wrestle with our tradition. I think in certain ways in these months, I've experienced less of that wrestling. We haven't had time. And instead, I feel like there's been this sort of wonder in my community about like, oh, Torah is speaking to us. Like the words that we've inherited and the ways that our tradition, like the texts of our tradition are actually addressing the struggle. And we get to meet our moment in our text in a way that I think in times of more calm, perhaps, we hadn't understood how relevant it was. I think that in this moment, there's an awakening to the resources, right? To like the creativity and the possibilities that exist because we've planted ourselves in faith communities and because we get to build sort of unexpected coalition and relationships with other communities of faith. Like that's happening because we share commitments. We might not share interpretation. We might not share all of our values as aligned or use the same language to describe it, but that there's a way in which being planted in community already gave us the capacity to work together and to find others who are working together. And so I think there have been so many questions. We have been nonstop question asking, but I think actually there's a clarity and an energy right now about the momentum we get to build, planted in our faith tradition and planted in this ecosystem of communities of faith.
And Imam Malid, are you finding members of the Islamic Center, are some of them questioning their beliefs or their faith?
Not necessarily questioning, but sometimes I've received some questions like, what can we do in these moments? How can we respond in a way that's pleasing to God? What God wants from us? I think that's the question that I received the most. And one of the things we have in the Islamic faith is that this realm of existence, this world is full of tests and trials. It's not paradise, which means you're going to see so many issues. So we have that kind of approach to life on earth, and that whatever struggles we face, we know that this is part of the game, and that we do whatever we can to respond in a way that is pleasing to God. One way is to look at what God wants from us, wants us to protect the dignity of every human being, to be united, to have hope in His mercy. I mean, those are the things that we revive, especially in moments like this. And I would add that sometimes when we live in good times, there are certain passages in the scripture, in the Quran, that may not be so relevant. But in a moment like this, it becomes so clear, so conspicuous, like this is what you need to do. So I think for anything that happens, I believe there is no pure evil. I think with every hardship, there is some good that comes out of it. And we keep that approach and that hope in mind. Yeah.
And Janae, back to you. It really, for me, has felt like Minnesota's faith community has been a leader, in the charge in this response, maybe even more so than many of the traditional activists or organizers. And it makes me think of sort of a biblical term. Was all of this, all the preparation, the relationships, the partnerships that you all have been working on for years and months, was it all for such a time as this?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, for those who don't know the reference, for such a time as this is something that's phrased in the book of Esther, where there is a political moment in which it is very clear that Esther was to be born and was raised a particular way and was positioned a particular way for this moment. And I think every single Minnesotan was wondering that about themselves. I mean, if you think about just being in this state in the last 10 years, what we have experienced, what we've gone through together, there is something divine about who we are, why we were created, why we were connected, why we are here in this moment, and what we are called to do in this time. who we are called to be. There's a reason we're the North Star State. There's a reason that we have beautifully laid out this sermon for the entire country to get to witness and get to echo and get to iterate. And so, yeah, I think every single person should be thinking, what is my role? What is the thing that I'm called to do right now? Because I definitely have one.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to a special North Star Journey Live conversation with Minnesota faith leaders. We're looking back at how churches, mosques, synagogues, and other centers of spirituality led during the federal immigration enforcement surge in January and February. Here's who I have with me: Imam Molid Ali, Rabbi Ariel Lakak Rosenberg, Pastor Yarold Osorto, and Minister Janae Bates Amari. We've touched on this, but I want to specifically address how your faith, personally, each of you, how your faith motivated you as you led your communities through the crisis. And Janae, I kind of want to get in your personal business a little bit. I like to do that. How did you see spirituality motivating you as you equipped others? Because first, you get up, you're Janae first. So what was going through your mind, and what was going on in your home church?
Yeah. So first of all, if you can't tell by my voice, I'm a Black woman. And being a Black woman minister, especially in Minnesota, has its own joys and challenges. And as I put on the full armor of God every single morning,
yes,
I have to remember, who I am and who I'm called to be, like this notion of for such a time as this. And the things that I continue to think about, one, some may be surprised by this, but I get grounded in anger first.
Anger motivates.
Anger. And let me say why. I believe that there is something very utilitarian to righteous anger. I actually get very frustrated by the ways in which the church in particular can comfort themselves to sleep and get to a place of, well, God is in control, which means I do nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I get righteously angry about the kind of Pharisees that we witness in our own day and age. And particularly because in this country, white Christian nationalism is the tool that has been used to weaponize ICE, to take our food assistance, to take our health care, to rob us, and then put it into the most wealthiest of people. Or to take these things that we all need and love that allows us to thrive, and then gives us Operation Metro Surge and says, you're welcome. And I refuse to allow that to happen. I believe that that is truly an evil, and it is an abomination. And so I get very grounded in that. And then I get grounded in love. What does it mean for me to have radical public love for every single person, including those individual ICE agents? What does it mean for me to go out and to do that? And it requires me to get in relationship with a bunch of other people. It requires me to go and talk to folks, not just to speak from a microphone, which is what some folks know me for, but to go and organize people to remind them that we all have agency. That one of the most dangerous things about an authoritarian regime is that they want you to believe that everything is inevitable, that there is no choices, that you have no options, you just have to acquiesce to what they're doing. And if I, by the grace of God, can go out and love each other and inspire one another to love each other radically to the point that we know we have the choice to love in the midst of hate, we will win. I am so clear about that. But I have to get really angry first. And then I get to go out and love beautifully.
Imam Molid, Ramadan just ended. Tell me, how that has helped sustain your faith at this time, and as well as other people in your community.
Yeah, we just ended Ramadan and we just celebrated the Eid as well last Friday. Ramadan in the Islamic calendar, it's a whole month. Based on the lunar calendar, it could be 29 or 30 days. And it is an entire month where it purifies us as Muslims, because from morning until sunset, we don't eat or drink. It's an entire intensive month of a spiritual training. And it teaches us also what it means to be human. We're not only appetites, we're not only to eat or drink, we're spiritual beings in human experiences. And I think Ramadan, it came in a time that we needed the most. Yeah, we needed the most because we were just coming out of the tribulations that we have experienced as a community. Ramadan came and it was a relief for us. It really it brought us back to our faith. We saw things were so chaotic and so confusing, but once you have a faith, Ramadan grounded our hearts to what we need the most, which is faith in God.
Rabbi Ariel, like Moulid and his fellow Somali Americans, Jewish people around the globe are familiar with persecution. So tell me, what tenets of the Jewish faith were particularly poignant to you as you have been leading your congregation in your community? How are you doing?
Yeah, so this week coming up, we're going to begin the holiday of Passover, of Pesach, which is the holiday where we every single year mark the movement from oppression to liberation. Right? We have to cross through the narrowest place to be able to move from the squeeze of oppression into the possibility, the messy possibility, right, of getting free. And this year, that holiday means a lot to me. Right? I haven't had time to clean my kitchen yet. I haven't had time to prepare for the holiday, but I feel like these last few months, we have been in the practice of preparing for Passover, for Pesach. And one of the key teachings that I love about this season is that the Israelites in the time when they were really under the heaviest moment of that oppression, what called God's attention to them wasn't anyone's advocacy. It was their remembering they could call out. Right? It was like they had gotten so quiet, so submitted under that oppression, and then they called out. And that's actually what catalyzed the possibility of liberation, was just that first act of saying, this is not okay. And this year, I've really been thinking about the whistles and about the way in which, I feel when I witnessed abductions in our community, my breath wanted to seize in my chest, right? When I found out that our state had taken away medical care from our undocumented neighbors, my breath wanted to freeze in my chest, right? When I have trans congregants who are so afraid of getting just stopped in the airport or getting persecuted by this administration, my breath wants to freeze. And I feel like those whistles came as the most incredible teacher to say, we've got to call out, we've got to unlock our breath, we've got to start moving. And that actually that whistle, that technology that let us, maybe we were too scared to yell, right? Or maybe we wouldn't have known what to say. But just putting that little instrument in our mouths helped unlock our breath. And we became so much bigger than we might have experienced ourselves in that moment. And I think that's a spiritual technology right there. Yes, it is also a little piece of plastic, that our neighbor had 3D printed. But it's also a spiritual technology of saying, if we are going to get free, we need to keep breathing and we need to make noise about it. And I think as I anticipate this holiday and the obligation that we as Jews have to really open our hearts and imagine ourselves in liberation, it's going to start by making sure that we stay in our breath and make sure that we actually together help each other make more noise, more righteous, beautiful, cacophonous noise than we knew we were capable of.
And back to you, Pastor Yerold, a personal question. How do you describe what sustains you, what allows you to continue to be hopeful and to stand up as a leader?
I'll admit that I've had plenty of days where I've not been hopeful, and plenty of days where I have felt the isolation of being a public leader, of leading a predominantly immigrant congregation, of being a Latino pastor in Minnesota. But then I think I find myself in a community that has loved deeply and continues to love deeply. And one of the beautiful ways that they show that love is through food. And I don't think I've gone hungry this entire these last couple of months. Like yesterday, I arrived and they had warm tortillas waiting for me. And just the way that my community has shown care for me, right? That the work that we do is a work that is mutual, and that we, in our moments of trial, show up for one another. And sometimes that's with food. But the other practice, if you know me really well, you know that I love candles. But there was this moment of a few weeks ago where I walked into the sanctuary and I saw some candles lit. And I learned that one of my community members had been offering to light candles as prayers for people that couldn't come to church every day. And that has stuck with me as a practice that I now do as well, and join those prayers by lighting a candle when I walk into the sanctuary.
Candles make me think of darkness. And I think so many people have this belief that darkness does not win. Darkness does not get to win. And so has this moment just been a reminder that if we seek out light and if we connect with others, that things can be different?
I think I would reframe it a little bit, and I would say that the gentle darkness holds us so that we could also see the light, that it's not a thing that is competing. Darkness and light can coexist in a way that I think sometimes darkness has been co-opted, but there's something about the still darkness of the night where you can hear God's presence in a very different way than sometimes during the noisiness of the daylight. And so I think that the light shining in the darkness is a good image to sustain this work. Yeah.
All of you all have inspiring stories, and we could easily continue to listen to you for another hour, but we don't have all that time. Our time is drawing to a close, but I want to end with this. We asked each of you to do a little work for us. We asked you to bring something from your own faith tradition that might help those of us who are listening right now to process what many of us would describe a collective moral injury that we've experienced. So I want to hear and see what you brought, what you want to share and say. Who would like to go first? Who brought something to share?
We all did?
Did everyone bring something?
I think we all did.
Okay.
We followed the assignment.
That's
right. Okay, well, I'm going to...
I'm ready. I feel like
Imam, I will start with you, Imam Olid.
Yeah, so there is a passage in the Quran where God says, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانصَبْ وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. The basic translation is that indeed with every hardship comes ease, and that truly it keeps me optimistic that hardship is not the final word and that there is ease afterwards. So that is the passage I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. Rabbi Ariel?
Yes. So I feel like every Shabbat when my community comes together, we start singing to welcome Shabbat, and I have to stop us and say, I think this week has been so hard that we don't remember how to sing. So we have to sing louder or more boldly to be able to then come into prayer. And so I think that has been a lesson for me. So I want to actually offer a verse of Psalms that we'll sing every morning of Pesach from Psalm 118. So I'll sing it, and I'll just, if you want to sing along, like I say to Shir Tikva, you don't have to know the words and you don't have to know the melody, sing anyway, and that's the way we'll learn together. And so the words in English are, from the narrow place, I call out, and from the expanse, I'm answered. And so that feeling, Pastor Gerald offered this sense of the complementarity of darkness and light, and I feel like also that sense of like we from the narrowest place can also then access the possibility of the expanse. Min hametzah karatia anani v'mechavya min hametzah karatia anani b'mechavya min hametzah karatia anani v'mechavya min hametzah karatia anani v'mechavya.
Thank you. Pastor Yerl, a gift to share with us?
So I thought about this for the last 24 hours, and I was like, there's so many things to offer. And I did go to a book of poetry that has sustained me for quite some time. And it's this poem by Otto René Castillo. He was 31 and was killed by military forces in Guatemala back in 1967. And I was reminded of that the struggle that we've lived here in Minnesota is not a struggle that hasn't occurred before, and that we're connected to many others and many who have died. And I also remembered how in my own family, there's still members that we don't know what happened to them during the Civil War in El Salvador. But I'll read it. It's called Before the Scales Tomorrow. And when the enthusiastic story of our time is told, for those who are yet to be born, but announce themselves with more generous face, we will come out ahead, those who have suffered most from it. And that being ahead of your time means suffering much from it. But it's beautiful to love the world with eyes that have not yet been born, and splendid to know yourself victorious when all around you it's all still so cold, so dark.
Thank you. And Janae, what would you like to share with our listeners?
I have something very simple. It is a scripture, and it's a short one. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to say why it's so important. It stood out to me differently. The day before George Floyd was killed, my mom collapsed from COVID and was hospitalized. And so I was freaking out about that. And then George Floyd was killed, and then there was the uprising. And I remember feeling like the world was collapsing. And I came across the scripture in Colossians 1:17 that says that God comes before all things, and in God all things are held together. And I think about that scripture very often, and I meditate on it, and most certainly throughout Operation Metro Surge, I would whisper it as we were getting ready to do vigils or go to arrests or stand outside of Whipple and pray. And it is a reminder that we get to be the hands and feet of God, and God is holding us all together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many thanks to all of our panelists today. Once again, we've been talking with Janae Bates Amari, a minister and the co-executive director of Isaiah, Minnesota, Reverend Gerald Osorto, senior pastor of St. Paul's San Pablo Lutheran Church in Minneapolis, Rabbi Ariel Lakak Rosenberg, the lead rabbi at Shir Tikva Synagogue, a congregation in South Minneapolis, and Imam Molid Ali, a leader at the Abubakar As-Sadiq Islamic Center in Minneapolis. We appreciate you all giving us your time today. And we appreciate everyone listening to this special North Star Journey Live discussion. You can find a complete version of this with some added comments, there's more, from some of the other faith leaders who have been here in the studio with us for our taping on the NPR website. That's nprnews.org, or on my podcasts. Just look for NPR News with Angela Davis. Be well, everyone. Thank you, Kelly.
I need to take a minute. So we're just going to solicit, if you're a faith leader here, first of all, I want to say, Karem, who's been here taking our photos, I would love to get a photo of all of the faith leaders that are here before you leave. So I'm going to say that. But if anybody wants to add a comment, I can bring the mic to you. Just raise your hand. Okay, so tell us who you are and what your organization you're representing and what the story is.
My name is Rita Nakashima Brock. I belong. I'm a member at First Christian Church Minneapolis, which was one of the warming centers after Alex Preddy was killed. I'm with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I work mostly as a chaplain, as a religious leader. I've been thinking a lot about the swath of damage to people's souls, the kind of moral injury that we're going to see emerge in the aftermath of everything that's happened. And by moral injury, I mean the grief, the profound grief, the fury, the outrage, the remorse, the guilt that I didn't do enough, the shame about things I failed to do, the horror of things I witnessed that people will be reflecting upon for a long time. And I think it's important to know that moral injury is a good thing because it's your conscience working. It's the good part of you that realizes the horror you faced and wants an answer. And I think something that sustained me through all of this was that is the goodness in people. That the aftermath of moral injury is still the goodness in people wanting out, and that the only way it can come out is by connection, by finding others to talk through, to work through all of that grief and sorrow and guilt and shame and horror. And for the thing that gives me great hope is in Minnesota, we made those connections. I think we saved a whole lot of people from sinking into a pit of despair and suicidality and something horrible because they knew their neighbors cared. I think that matters a whole lot. And so I was just grateful. I moved here 2 years ago. I was here in the 90s, and I decided I liked it well enough to retire here. So I moved here 2 years ago and feel already deeply rooted. And so I'm just grateful for the Minnesota. I know people in LA who were fighting ICE and people in Chicago before we did it. But there was something about the ways, the eruption of love that happened in, at least for me in the Twin Cities, was a remarkable thing.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to offer a comment?
Hi, I'm Rabbi Harold Kravitz, Rabbi Emeritus of Adath Yeshurun Congregation in Minnetonka. And first of all, just appreciating the panel and your questions of them that were fabulous. In the end of this past year, my wife invited me to join her in being trained as by Minarca, a rapid response line, to join what now is some 30,000 Minnesotans in witnessing what ICE is doing and holding them accountable through not intervening, but through videotaping and our presence. At the beginning of, mid-January, I was invited by a young rabbi to join a meeting of March that you heard mentioned here. And I heard stories of Protestant clergy who had tried to visit those who were being detained at the Whipple Federal Building and clergy who were denied pastoral visits to them. And there was a sense that would need to be a lawsuit to address this. It just so happened the same evening got a call from someone whose bar mitzvah I officiated many years ago, now a partner of a major law firm, and who's working with another former bar mitzvah. And the two of them, who was now actually president of the Hennepin County Bar Association, the two of them were working both with the Attorney General's office and with the ACLU around many lawsuits that are going forward, because the courts have been one of the more effective ways in which we can see justice done in our communities across this country. What they pointed out was there were a number of lawsuits in which the voice of the faith community would be very important. And I knew a lot of clergy and a lot of faith groups, both locally and nationally. And so that's something that I began to work on. And of late, there are two lawsuits in particular that are going forward. One which is going to be heard next week in federal court, related to sensitive locations. ICE had a long policy of not going to places like schools, hospitals, congregations, which they have now crossed that line and in doing irreparable damage. And so it was very powerful to see faith organizations, basically locally, who signed on to offer amicus briefs, friend of the court statements, in support of that lawsuit. And then the other lawsuit, which was the first one I mentioned, that was filed against the federal government for preventing clergy from making pastoral visits to those who were detained. It was very satisfying last Friday when that suit was heard in federal court just nearby here in St. Paul, and the judge said, not okay. The government has to come up with a reasonable plan that can be done about how clergy can visit. It cannot be, as the judge said, like Dorothy at the door of the Emerald City, where someone opens the gate and says, you can't come in, with no policy, no clarity about why or when. So that was really important, and other lawsuits that will be going forward. But I think it's really important in the context of this program that these young lawyers understood the importance of the voice of the faith community in speaking up, and it was very satisfying.
Thank you.
Well.
Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment? We just have a couple minutes left before we have to end things. No more testimonies? Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you for giving us part of your day today, for visiting us here at NPR headquarters. And I look forward to hearing this on the radio again this coming Tuesday, which I think might be March 31st at 9 a.m. You'll hear it on the radio, stream it. It'll be streaming live at 9 to 10 a.m. And then it'll shortly after that will be on our website and a podcast episode on Tuesday. Please share with your friends and neighbors. And again, so wonderful to meet all of you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys were fantastic. Thank you.